Hello again, Facebook Live. It is Elizabeth here to talk to you about more exciting and fascinating literature, movies, whatever. Today I'm also joined by Cotton, who just had to get involved in this particular review. He really does enjoy being in the absolute wrong places at the absolute wrong time, but I love him for it. Anyway, we really shouldn't have him here because today's theme is foxes. I know it's not really a theme, but after Beauty and the Beast last month, I just wanted to relax and read something, nice and fun and pleasant and about foxes, because I really like foxes. So today we're going to be reviewing, by Cotton, today we're going to be reviewing two books. First book is called Pecks. It's by Sarah Pennypacker and illustrated by John Klassen. And the second book we're going to be reviewing is The Heavenly Fox by Richard Parkes. Let's start with Pecks, because I cried like a baby the entire time I was reading this book. The story of Pecks is about a little fox named Pecks and his boy, Peter. And Peter rescues Pecks when he's a little cub and takes care of him. But at the very beginning of the book, we're in Pax's point of view, and he gets abandoned on the side of the road in the forests because there is a war going on, and as we all know from books and movies about war, when war happens, we have to get rid of our childhood pets and go grow up. So Pax is left on the side of the road, and he has no idea what he's going to do because he's been living as a pet this whole time. Then, interestingly enough, we not only get Pax's point of view, we also get the boy Peter's point of view in like a two-perspective story, kind of like another book I know. I'll tell you guys about that later. But anyway, self-plug. But anyway, the story is about Peter and Pax both struggling in these new roles. Peter tries to immediately leave his caretaker grandfather's house, and pretty much instantly, because he's a kid who unfortunately has no skills, breaks his ankle, like, instantaneously, the poor kid. I feel so bad for him. And he's taken in by an old woman named Vola. And as we come to find out as the story progresses, we meet a whole bunch of characters on both sides of the perspective. From one angle, we have Pax and his friends that he makes friends with, another group of foxes. There is Bristle, a girl fox, Runt, her little baby brother, who is the runt, and an old wolf named Gray. And then on Peter's side, we have his grandfather and father are unfortunately both portrayed pretty negatively, especially his father, which was actually really intriguing. The whole theme of the entire story is the dehumanization of war. And I really liked how the book talked about it in a way that wasn't one of those, war is evil things. It was more on the personal tragedies that occur because of war that are never talked about, even when war is necessary. The old woman, Vola, who takes care of Peter, helps him mend his ankle, helps him learn how to become a man, as it were. She used to be a soldier. And it's really, really cool to get to know her story piece by piece. The most wonderful part of the whole thing for me is she says that after she left the war the last time, after she left battle, she had no idea who she was. She had no idea what she liked. She had no idea what she didn't like. The only thing that she knew she really did like was peanut butter, and so for an entire year all she ate was peanut butter sandwiches, because the only thing she was sure she liked. And it was about her trying to rediscover herself. There's also a wonderful aside where a soldier that she ends up killing, she finds in his pocket a copy of The Adventures of Sinbad. And she spends her whole life trying to tell the story of Sinbad through these marionettes, always wanting to tell it, but I've never been able to see it. And the story of Sinbad is a really nice one because traditionally, someone would go with the story of Odysseus if you really wanted to make a comparison about the soldier coming back from war. But I think Sinbad is equally cool. it definitely makes more sense for a young adult book because it's a lot more fun than Odysseus is. It's a bit more of the swashbuckling adventure, or more of a modern take, as it were, on Odysseus, as opposed to, it's still very similar. Boy, like, so much death. So much death in this book. I won't do spoilers because I think it's a really good book, and I cried 3 times during the climax in denouement. Every character gets some redemption. Even the father. The father is portrayed as just this man who has lost humanity, and he's lost his wife, and he has no idea what to do with his young son, which is unfortunate. They're very clever about not giving a specific timeline, but the idea of war, I think, is universal no matter what. There are cars in this world, there are buses, but not, cell phones or Ubers. And as always, I really appreciate in stories when they don't try to modernize it. They don't try to make it hip and trendy, just make it timeless in that way, and where the world has cars, but you don't really know where. The dad goes off to war, and the boy's been thinking this whole time, I will reveal this spoiler, the boy's been thinking the whole time, oh, he's been drafted, he had to go, and he's trying to reconcile with himself. He had to let Pecks go, but instantaneously he regrets it, and he wants to get him back. But at the near the end, it's revealed that the dad was not drafted. He chose to go back, and it's like just a whammy of a hit. I felt so bad for Peter. It just breaks my little heart about this man who is so dehumanized, so lost in this world that he runs from his son because he doesn't know how to handle what to do with him. There's also a wonderful thing about how Peter feels he can't ever show his anger because his father always showed his anger. And it's so sad because you realize this kid is being forced to hold his emotions because he feels like this anger is genetic. Like, if he lets out his anger or his guilt, he will be just as bad as his father. He won't be able to contain his rage either. And there's something, it's so scary and juicy and so hypnotizingly real, and it was really great. I really enjoyed Pax's perspective too. It was really cool to see this story of war being told from the perspective of these foxes, which is in some ways even more innocent than that of the boy. You have this group of foxes who they only know of the humans as war-sick, and the old fox, Gray, has seen war-sick humans before. And the term war-sick, this book came out before Wonder Woman, but when they said that, it reminded me a lot of the Wonder Woman movie about the idea that these men have been driven mad by Ares, and they are being compelled to fight as opposed to actually wanting to do it. And it was a nice way to show that. And they play the environmental angle without getting preachy. I did appreciate that as well. They show the rivers turn brown with sludge, and there's this great harrowing scene where they come across this part of the camp that the soldiers are stalked at, and they've run electrical wires through the ground. So if anything steps on it, it immediately blows up. And there's this rocking scene of just this stag who doesn't know stepping on one of the lines, and it blows up. And they recommend ages 10 to 14. Yes, definitely. Not that the story or the themes are not important for younger children, but there is definitely death everywhere. The resolution was probably the best part of this book for me because it really ties everything together, and it's so sweet and so sad. It reminds me a lot of Where the Red Fern Grows, which is another one of those amazing boy and animal books, stories, and it's all so tragic. But it really was good to read. I actually, when I picked this up from McKay's, it's actually signed by the author, which is really cool. I always love to get those in my collection. And there are these really adorable little illustrations in it by John Klassen. And they're just super, black and white, very sparse, just to give you the general gist of things. It never goes too precious, but it never goes too harsh either. I definitely recommend Pecks. The next book, The Heavenly Fox, I am not exactly sure what to make of it, but I'll give you the gist of the story. There's a fox called Spring Shadow, and all foxes know from a young age that if you can make it to 500 years and brew this golden elixir, you will attain immortality. So Spring Shadow has been working all these past 500 years to become immortal. The way you brew the golden elixir, the way you brew the elixir is you steal life force from the people around you. And as a fox who's already lived at least 100 years, she can turn herself into a beautiful woman and seduce and steal the life energy out of people that she needs. It's her, like, the very last day of her 499th year, and she has a lover, Zhao Fan. It's going to be hard. These are all Chinese names, and I'm woefully ignorant on pronunciation in that department. But she has a lover, Zhao Fang, and he says that he loves her and he wants to marry her, and she unfortunately can't just leave him be. He's so weak, she actually ends up taking his force and killing him. As a fox, I do love this interpretation of foxes. As a fox in Chinese or Japanese literature, she's pretty amoral. She lives by her own standards. So to her, killing is an inevitability, a necessity to achieving immortality, and therefore worthwhile and not above reproach. She brews the golden elixir, she attains immortality, and then she realizes, oh God, is heaven all there is? She, like, day one is like, boy, this was a big letdown, which was the most amazing turnaround for our character. You see this character work so hard to attain immortality, attains it, gets to heaven, is like, well, this was a letdown. It's the best turnaround. She attains immortality, and the goddess of mercy arrives to her and says, I have a message from your dead husband, Zhao Fang, and he says that he loves you and he forgives you. And Spring Shadow hears that and she's like, well, he's an idiot. That's the kind of character we're dealing with. I definitely, she has to go on a journey of redemption because she finds herself attaining this emotion called guilt, which she does not want at all. So she's like, all right, I better, fix this whole thing before this becomes a problem with me and my emotions. I really enjoy this kind of character in literature. It's not one I can get behind, but it's one that I definitely enjoy watching experience life, because she's such a smartass. She's such a smartass, and she sees heaven and people at face value, while at the same time being woefully ignorant about things like love and acceptance and guilt and redemption. The Goddess of Mercy, she is wily. She is a trickster. Like, she is more trickster than the foxes are trickster. And she kind of manipulates Spring Shadow into getting exactly what she wants to happen, which is a good thing. As readers, as human readers, we're like, yes, we are glad this is what happened. But for Spring Shadow, it's just like, all right, I respect your trickery. I won't press charges. There's a lot of really great descriptions in the Heavenly Fox. I don't, unfortunately, get as emotionally invested in the characters as opposed to Pecks, but I do appreciate the story. Richard Parks, I looked at some of his other work after finishing this, and he seems a guy who, with this story, you can see how skinny this book is. It's much more of a fable than it were a story about where the characters are super important. In the end, there are only 4 characters we really get to know. We have Spring Shadow, we have this crazy Taoist immortal monk named Wild Eye, who attained immortality not through prayer or devotion or good deeds, but because he literally stole into the celestial gardens in heaven and stole a peach of immortality. So all the gods have no idea what to do with him, and they're just like, well, we'll just let him be. And he's awesome and crazy. The Goddess of Mercy, I really dug her character because she's always smiling, but you always are like, how great is it to make the Goddess of Mercy someone sinister and wily, like, to achieve her ends. I thought that was the greatest idea. And especially the whole thing about, is heaven all there is? It's a very big idea to deal with all at once in a story, especially a short story like this. Richard Parks, he introduces a lot of ideas, and that's where I think the whole fable aspect comes from. He introduces a lot of ideas that then we as the reader are meant to think about. a lot of the people are right. It does end very abruptly for what you thought the book was going to be. You kind of think, oh, it's going to be a story of redemption, and she's going to learn how to be a little bit more human, and she's going to learn from her mistakes. In the end, she really doesn't, but she does do the right thing, and it seems like that's just the beginning of her step, because now that she's immortal, you know, this is just the first step, choosing to take the journey. Now we have to figure out what the journey is going to be. This one, just for the idea of taking lovers and the imagery of hells, lots of different hells, I would say above Pecks. So Pecks is 10 to 14, 14 and up. I wouldn't, you know, it's hard for me to judge fables and fairy tales because they deal with a lot of heavy imagery and thoughts, but they are still universally applicable. So it's hard for me to judge it in that way. I also, this may be my my prejudices showing. For me, I always find a lot of Chinese, Japanese literature, TV shows, movies, Eastern culture to be much more focused on the environments and the greater overarching themes as opposed to you really connecting with the characters. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, for me personally, there are books that I've read, not even Asian literature books, but just books that I've read where if I can't get behind any of the characters, I just gotta be like, bye Felicia, can't get into them. And it's not anyone's fault, it's just I, as a reader, really like to see character-driven stories, which is why Pecks really speaks to me. As it is, The Heavenly Fox is still really good. I definitely recommend it because it got my idea, you know, my brain juices flowing. It's also got the woman, the beautiful woman with 9 tails. Ninetales happens to be my favorite Pokemon too, so I just really like the idea of Asian literature where the fox has many tails like that. And the idea of the fox as the trickster being tricked is really cool in this. And they do a good job, Richard Parks does a good job of making sure that there's at least one human character. Even though he's dead and in hell, there's still one human character that we can get behind, as opposed to just all these immortals whose, you know, concept of the world and of morality may be very far from our own. Alright, again, that's Pecks and The Heavenly Fox. I definitely recommend them both. Look at some reviews if you want to. These are both kind of under-reviewed, unfortunately, and that's kind of a shame. I always hate when after I read a book, when I go onto Amazon to read the reviews, and not a lot of people have talked about it. It's always a great thing to hear from people who read the book. I'll probably go on and write a review of this after this is done. But thanks for watching about these 2 books about foxes. I'll try to think of some sort of theme as we go forward of books that I talk about. Foxes just happened to pop up. It was pure coincidence that the 2 books I picked to read next were about foxes. So for my next couple of books, we might go a bit more thematic. So every time we watch, we can see something similar, or I talk about similar themes and compare and contrast. Excuse me. In the meantime, if you're looking for a book to read and you just don't like foxes, you know, I've got a great book here that I'm sure you'd be interested in reading. This is my book, Colorblind, and when I talked about Pecks having 2 perspectives, instantaneously reminded me of my own book. And while it would have been bad to read it beforehand, because then I'd be like, oh, I'm stealing this idea, to read the book after I finish my own book is to be like, ah, look, someone else had a really good idea just like me. But the book is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and those of you who watched my last review about the live-action version of Beauty and the Beast, you'll know how seriously I take that story. So I would love for you guys to read it and offer up what you think of my interpretation of the story. If you go up to the Facebook cover photo for Old Sins, you'll see it. You just search it on Amazon. Super easy to find. Either which way, I look forward to reading some more and talking to you guys again about some more books or movies. Maybe it'll be Wonder Woman, because boy, Wonder Woman just makes me want to kick all kinds of ass, so maybe that'll be what I talk about next, if a book just doesn't appeal to me right away. For those of you who know, there is a shelf on this bookshelf which is only books that have not been read, and I am not allowed to get any more books until I finish the shelf that's full of books I haven't read yet, so I'll go through those next. But it was great talking to you guys, and I will see you for the next Facebook Live review. Take care!